let's go. So it's my great pleasure to introduce to you a series of really interesting panelists who are going to tell you some dynamic and interesting elements to expand your brand and land in Asia, APAC, Singapore, the region. Before we start to introduce you to those experts, I think it's very important to introduce you to our sponsor and to the company who's made this all possible, and that's GS1 UK. And I'm delighted to introduce you to the marketing director, Sarah Atkins. Sarah, tell us more, and over to you.
Thanks, Mark. Good morning, everybody. We've been working with the team at GTM in order to make export a reality for our 57,000 members, the vast majority of whom are small businesses. And we thought we were facing into a perfect storm with COVID and then with Brexit. But what we found is direct-to-consumer trade has been the lifeline for our small business community as we've gone through the last 2 years. And what that has done is opened up new audiences for them.
With a bit of technical understanding, a bit of IT skills, GD&T skills, geometry and tolerancing when it comes to that, like data meaning, 3-to-1 alignment.
Please, can you go on mute? Thank you.
Amazing. So we found when we researched amongst them that the Asia Pac region was of real interest to them in order to expand their businesses. And rather than export being the third or the fourth year of a growth plan, it's now the third or the fourth month. So with GTM and the panel that we've got here today, it's all about practicality. It's not about what may or may not be doing. They are genuine experts. Please put your answers to them. And we've built this as some really handy hints to get you going. We've also got a more in-depth session next week where you can have one-to-one sessions with any of the people on the panel to really give you those skills. Because as we look at the headline stats, 20% of the businesses that have set up in the last 2 years have already had to close because of the not being able to expand and actually attract the customers that they need. And we think expansion overseas is absolutely critical to that new business success. So I'm going to head back to Mark and the team and have a really great session, everybody, and look forward to hearing what you think about today's content. Cheers.
Sarah, thank you very much indeed. So it's my great pleasure to kickstart the session with a really fascinating presentation around market entry, e-commerce and supply chain growth from Singapore from Fiona Thai at TMX. Fiona, over to you.
Hello. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Fiona and I'm the BD director at TMX Global. I sit in Singapore. So yeah, it's almost late afternoon for me. But I'm very happy to be here today. I have just one slide to share with you today in my 5 minutes, but I really hope that you get a lot of insights from it. So just to give you a bit of background, at TMX, we are actually a digital and supply chain consultancy, and we've done projects where we have helped brands from Europe and America actually expand into Asia Pacific. So what we do is actually really market research for the brand, trying to find out what's the right strategy for them, develop that strategy, and then hold their hand and guide them through the execution phase until they're finally live on the channels that they wish to be on in whichever country that we have identified that's right for their business in Southeast Asia at least. My personal background is that I come from an e-commerce enabler as well. So I have spoken to a wide variety of brands on, the first question is always, how do I start, right? So I hope that my knowledge of the landscape in Southeast Asia will give you a greater insight as to how you should begin. So I'm going to share my one slide with you today. Okay. And I hope if you have any questions, please just put them in the chat, and I'm more than happy to answer them either at the end of my session or later on. So this is really a pyramid that shows you, right, all the different things that you have to consider when you want to enter the market within Southeast Asia. So of course, the 6 largest markets that we know are on top there, which countries. So what we do is when we work with a brand, we try to help them to identify, based on your product assortment, based on your product pricing, right? Because every country has different purchasing powers in terms of their population. Based on your target audience, based on where your competitors are present, in whichever vertical you're in, fashion, apparel, FMCG, food, we identify the countries that you can try getting into, and then we have to map out, whether it's in a phased approach, whether you want to go in country by country, or whether we can launch 2 countries at a time, because it depends on how much resources you have and the effort it takes, right? And then next we go on to, after figuring out the channels, we then need to figure out after figuring out the countries, we then need to figure out the channels. So in the channels, we have split it into 3 main types of channels. The first, if you start from the left, is really your brand.com, right? You're a retailer, obviously you have a brand, maybe you have an existing website in your current countries that you operate right now, but what kind of investment will it take for you to come into Asia Pacific and set up your own brand.com and app here? So I think in terms of investment costs, we can help you to the research there is important. And what comes along with a brand.com is also a lot of marketing dollars, right? You need to invest a lot in driving traffic to a brand, especially if your brand is not established in this market as of now. So what we often see is there's a lot of noise going on. So everyone can hear me well? It's okay? Yeah, okay. So what we see often is a lot of brands starting on the platforms, right? If you look at the middle of the screen, all of you must know, you've heard of Lazada, Shopee, the very popular regional marketplaces in this region that are dominating the e-commerce scene right now. So a lot of brands tend to want to start there, right? Because they already have millions of people using the apps. They already have millions of views every single day, every single month, and they do a lot of marketing for their apps too. So you can jump on the bandwagon, set up your stores on these platforms. But at the same time, what's to consider is that there's a lot of competition, just from big brands, from smaller sellers. There's a lot of competition on these platforms as well. And other than such regional marketplaces, you also have the local heroes, right? If you look at a few logos up there, you can see Central Group, which is a Thai company, and they have their own marketplace too. You can see Blibli, you can see Bukalapak and Tokopedia. They are all local huge marketplaces in Indonesia as well, other than the regular Shopee and Lazada. And then for Singapore, there's Q10. For Vietnam, there's Tiki, there's Jodidong. And another platform that can also be considered would be vertical marketplaces. So for this sort of marketplaces, we call them horizontal marketplaces because they do serve a wide range of industries, whether you're fashion, electronics, FMCG, you can go onto these horizontal marketplaces, right? But there are also vertical marketplaces that can be explored. So for example, we have gone into, we've helped an alcohol brand to set up on alcohol-specific marketplaces also in Philippines. And these are just websites that, they only sell alcohol. They don't do anything else. So these are platforms that are easy to get into, but what you need to consider is the commission costs that you need to pay to them, and also the marketing dollars that you still have to invest into them nonetheless. And then finally, emerging platforms, which all of us know about, right? Instagram Shop, Facebook Shop, TikTok Shop, that's coming yet not coming, but we believe that they're coming to Asia soon. And of course, quick commerce as well, the Grabs, which is a ride-hailing app, ride-hailing apps are very big in Southeast Asia. So there's Grab, there's Gojek. Imagine Uber, right? Like Uber selling groceries and all that. So there's also quick commerce coming up. But what to know about channels is that you just have to be conscious of cannibalization, right? You don't want to be on too many channels, and then it gets tough to manage, and you need to figure out your different assortment and different campaigns for each of them, which is a mighty lot of work to do. And just coordinating, SKUs, pricings, promotions across all of them can be a challenge too. So when thinking about channel strategy, it's important to really be focused and know, maybe take on a phased approach as well, right? Start with one and then gradually build on as you figure out what products works with the target audience in each market. And then finally, we get to the last part, which is operations, right? After setting up all these channels, listing your store, how do you then keep it going? How do you sustain it? So you start with marketing options. You have to drive traffic to your sites, right? Whether it's a brand.com or your marketplace stores. So which are the marketing agencies that you want to work with? You know, who are the partners that you can look to help you formulate a strategy to drive a consumer traffic to your stores. And then next would be channel management options, like I talked about. So in Southeast Asia, the concept of an e-commerce enabler, which is a company that helps you to manage your various channels, that's what they do. It's very popular. I know it's not very well known probably in Europe, but this is a very Southeast Asia specific sort of model. They help you to manage all your different channels. They do pricings for you, they do promotions, they work with the marketplaces to come up with your marketing plans. They have joint business plans, they sit together, they say your target for the Q1, Q2, Q3 is however many thousands of dollars, and they work with you, right, to try and achieve the revenue that you're looking for. So there are a lot of partners out there, and these are partners, and you also have platforms which are just pure tech platforms like SaaS aggregators. So there is a choice, right, that you have to make too. And then afterwards we come to fulfillment. So fulfillment, it depends on whether your products, you need cold storage, you have medical devices that you require licenses to be in place. Sunglasses count as medical devices. I never knew that until I had Ray-Ban as a client, right? And you also have to think about, you know, where are you going to store your inventory, right? Let's say you have identified Singapore and Philippines as your two markets. Do you store your inventory in a regional DC in, say, Singapore and do cross-border to Philippines? Or do you have two local DCs, and who are your two local partners, right? Because I think at this point, if you're just starting up in these countries, you're not going to look to build a full warehouse and operate it on your own. So, you know, which are the 3PL partners that you can work with? And then finally, it goes to last mile delivery. So fulfillment and last mile delivery is very important, because in the Southeast Asian context, I'm sure you've heard of our singles days, right? 11/11, 12/12. All these days, there are peak periods for e-commerce where people see it's like Black Friday, right? Yeah, where brands can see 20 to 30 times the volume that they do in a day compared to other days. And this is when all different marketplaces are vying for the same last mile providers. So you have to make sure that, you know, you diversify your providers to make sure that your items can get out in time. So back when I was in an enabler, during these campaign periods, we used to run the warehouses 24/7 through the weekends, and we could still not get the stocks out, because there would just be no one answering the call to come and pick up the parcels. So this is just something that, you know, when you're looking for a partner, you need to ask how they're handling the current peak periods, and, you know, whether or not your customer service levels would be impacted during such peak periods. These are really real considerations, because consumer expectations are pretty high in all these markets. We're all very spoiled and very pampered. So, you know, we expect items next day delivery, maximum 2 days. Otherwise, we start to cancel orders and all that. So yes, so I hope I've given you a very quick breakdown of things to consider when you're looking to expand in the market, and I'm happy to answer more questions afterwards.
Fiona, that's really fascinating. Just a couple of quick things just to follow up on. I mean, so many different avenues to pursue. Obviously, we have a whole different slew of different companies here, but if this was just around focusing on B2C in Southeast Asia, what would be your advice on that?
So most of the platforms that I'm speaking to about here are all B2C platforms. B2B platforms are emerging in this market. We do see a couple of them starting to come out in the electronic space, and, you know, fashion space as well. But most of them are B2C, so you go direct to consumers. Yeah, so I would say that there's a lot of different options that you can take on if you're looking to go to B2C within this market. It's definitely not an issue.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
Well, just any other questions in the chat, Ian, that you can see at the moment?
So we have a question from Louise. She says she's a pet food manufacturer and needs vet certificates to export outside of the UK. Do all of the platforms offer fulfillment similar to Facebook? To fulfillment by Amazon?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
To make it worthwhile exporting, the company needs to move in pallets of goods, not cases. Is that possible?
yeah. So do you mean moving pallets of goods to like selling directly to so it's B2B sales and not really cases? But either way, there is Lazada and Shopee, which are the two biggest marketplaces, and they do have FBS, which is fulfilled by Shopee. So a similar concept to FBA, and also Lazada has FBL, which is fulfilled by Lazada. And both of these companies, I believe, are now starting to build out their cross-border logistics piece too. They currently, if you're looking to do cross-border, they might be able to help with providing you with the necessary warehouse spaces and all that to store your items. So yes, I would say, some of these platforms do have their own fulfillment logistics arms, and they're quite strong too.
Fantastic, Fiona. Thank you for that. And we'll get some more questions answered in the panel session towards the end.
Yeah.
Thank you for now, Fiona. We'll speak a bit more later. If I can now introduce you to CK, who will look more at the issues about how you make social commerce work for your brand in Southeast Asia. CK, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. And hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depends on where you're joining from. My name is Chirag Kautak, or I go by CK. That's easier. I am the co-founder of Jumper.ai, and very recently we've been acquired by Vonage, so part of the Vonage family now. And happy to really take the group here around, really diving into one of those boxes which was on Fiona's slide around the emerging platforms, right? And that's where, especially for Southeast Asia, who love to be transacting with people they know, they build trust with, social and conversations often is the place to start. So really, why social and conversations? We all know that how consumer behavior has shifted over the years, especially in the last couple of years with COVID and the pandemic. The connectivity between people and the way they interact with brands, it has changed drastically. Gone are those days when people were desktop first, looking at websites online, and just looking at text descriptions, browsing feeds. It's all about mobile first economy in Southeast Asia, especially in certain markets where social is the internet. Interacting with brands through visuals, videos, and these stories, and really that mass sharing, moving to that one-on-one messaging is a key trend we've seen in this part of the world. And when businesses make themselves available on these channels, we have seen that users are more and more open to connect and communicate with these businesses to really know about the products and, if possible, even transact over this. I can say I've bought variety of things on the Instagram. I've bought everything from jewelry gifts for my wife to cakes to food items. A vast variety of things have been purchased on some of these channels. So speaking really about APAC, Southeast Asia, where we see conversations coming in is really helping businesses connect with consumers and really getting some of the objectives. Why do consumers message businesses? They want to know more about product and pricing. No matter how clearly it is set up on social, where you're running ads, where you're running content, people want to be spoon-fed. And that's the part of the on-demand economy where we're seeing everything they want it now, they want it delivered to them spoon-fed. So how do we make that possible? And that's where conversational and social commerce comes in play. And people now expect instant responses. We can't be getting them waiting on a phone line, can't be saying we'll come back to you in 2 to 3 days. The faster you respond, the faster you get the customer, or you risk losing them. Often it's the easier way to shop, no need to jump through platforms. Imagine a user sees a laptop bag that they like on Facebook, and if they were able to talk to the business and just convert and complete that transaction, it just makes it more frictionless. And then having the ability to put automation with human agents, giving that personalized advice, bringing that whole personal shopping experience helps really understand the customer and deliver an experience which really cannot be done through e-commerce. And a certain degree, we are also seeing, especially in the small business space, the ability to negotiate prices with bulk purchases, with packaging is another advantage which we can through conversations. So that's from the user perspective. From the merchants and the business perspective, there are key reasons why it just makes it easier, right? We all know social platforms are great for discovery. Often every business will be advertising on social or putting content. It's really easy to reach a wider group of customers. Also, it is easier to set up businesses, especially in certain markets. We come across businesses who would have Instagram, who would have Facebook, but not a website. And that's the nature of today's economy, where this is the key thing they need to have. And of course, they can leverage the network effect that social media allows, having the ability to really amplify the reach through your existing networks. And studies have indicated that these are really the key reasons why it's really easy for merchants to get set up here. And it's key to really understand the customer and deliver a truly differentiated experience. Often, when done right, we've seen this can make news. We've worked across a variety of customers across different spectrums. And when using these platforms, we've all seen the rise of live stream, which I often joke of that it's bringing back the whole TV shopping experience, where you have the ability to show the products live. And those who are tuning in and are listening to you or listening to the hosts are high intent users. And where social commerce comes in, it's really about capturing those high intent users by converting them right there at the moment of inspiration, making that whole purchase experience easier. So in a nutshell, the way I summarize social commerce or conversational commerce, it's really bringing back the best of both worlds. That personal touch of the offline retail, where we talk to an advisor, we ask them for recommendation, what is good for me? Or I'm looking for this. Marry that together with the convenience that e-commerce, online commerce allows us to do by making a payment through cashless means online and getting those things delivered, as we all heard it, even within a few hours if the merchants support that. It's really bringing the best of both of these worlds together to deliver exceptional customer experiences. So the message I leave everyone with here is really about social, and these channels have often been looked at just the marketing channels, and it's often looked at a channel where you talk to customers. So really, how do businesses leverage these platforms and start talking with customers? That's where the opportunity is, and that's how you can really amplify your reach and drive more sales through new channels. I'll leave you with that thought, and happy to answer questions as on anything around social commerce to really help you get on with that journey.
CK, thank you so much. That's really, really telling stuff. My co-founder Ian has a question for you.
Yeah,
sure.
Chirag, you've got me sold on this. It seems like social commerce is definitely the next thing coming along. You said in there that it's easy to access, but if I'm working predominantly through a website, and it feels to me now like to use social commerce properly, I've got to get some content, I've got to get chat set up, I've got to get a different payment mechanism, I've got to integrate across some different platforms. Is it really that simple? And how much technology knowledge and expertise do you need to make that happen?
Sure, I think that's a great question there, Ian. I think it is easier said than done, but the good thing is platforms like us, we make life a little bit easier for the merchants, where we take care of a lot of these nuances. And platforms like us, like Jumper.ai, we really bring the end-to-end social commerce capabilities, where we are able to plug into an existing website so that you don't have to set up a new storefront, new catalog, set up a new set of SKUs, and set aside inventory. We plug into many of these e-commerce platforms to just sync inventories. And then we plug into the social channels, where we are able to just sync these catalogs into the Facebook shops, Instagram shops, etc., and those chat channels. where when the chats come in, we are able to automate conversations. And that's where our platform comes in and already comes with pre-built automations. Of course, allowing the flexibility for the brands to really tailor those conversations for their own need. And then payment, you bring that interesting point where those brands who already are on e-commerce and are taking online payments, we bring integrations to payment gateways. So it's as easy as just connecting the payment accounts to the likes of Jumper, for example. And that's how we bring together all the different pieces. And what we typically suggest is the brands continue to do what they do on social and drive traffic to different channels. And we take care of the social aspect and the chat aspect to really help that piece.
Thank you, CK.
CK, that's fantastic. Thank you for that. And we'll come back to you again in the panel session. Please, any delegates, do put some questions into the chat. Thrilled and delighted now to introduce you to a really important part and expert in all of this, and that's logistics and supply chain connectivity. And we have a really experienced expert in Olivier Linchet at Ascendia in Singapore to tell us more. Olivier, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Thanks for the introduction. So we heard the sexy stuff. Now we're going to go into the basic but crucial logistics, I would say. Just going to share a few slides from my side and explaining to you and really focusing on why Singapore is the right place and a hub as well for your expansion and you to actually enter this market. Firstly, just to introduce myself and give you a bit of insight on Ascendia. So I'm the CEO for the Southeast Asia region in Ascendia. And I would say that Ascendia is actually this year celebrating its 10 years of birthday and anniversary. And we've gone through a journey where initially we were a cross-border mail business, and now we've moved into an e-commerce cross-border logistics and B2C deliveries company. And we have two key pillars as such. One is the physical flow of products, which means the storage, the delivery. And the other one is about digital and how do we help company in their direct-to-consumer strategy through companies like eShopWorld or ScaleFast. So that's what Ascendia is doing. In Singapore as such, just to give you, Ascendia is based in the free trade zone in Singapore. And typically, we work a lot with small companies in Singapore that actually use us for two flows. When I say two flows, one is actually what we call the east to west. That's about companies which are entrepreneurs across the globe that manufacture their products in the region and use Singapore as a hub to actually ship globally to consumers. That's topic number one. Topic number two today, which is really the focus of this presentation, is about sellers which expand and sell to consumers in the Southeast Asia region, but not only in the Southeast Asia region, because we also have customers and sellers today which also sell, for example, to Oceania or to Korea or to Japan. So that's also a very strong focus for us as a business. I would say, you've heard that before, but firstly, you've got the digital partners and companies like TMX or CK, for example. They will help you actually in your strategy on how do I enter the market? What strategy do I have? What product do I sell? Which channel should I sell? And we actually sit at the background to say, okay, how should we help you with the logistics and how can we help you to actually deliver your product to the shoppers in the region? That's the key topic for us being Ascendia. It's true that, delivery was a pain point and is still one of the key pain points for the consumers and the shoppers in the region. Because if you think about Southeast Asia, I don't know how many of you have been traveling to Southeast Asia, but you can see that it's a very, very diverse region in terms of the geographies, of course. Although that most of the consumption will be done in the key, key cities, in the key, like for example, if we say about Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh, or if you say Jakarta for Indonesia, but still you have a very high geographies, which is quite difficult to deliver. The second one is about the customs, You know, each country has a different custom. So you need to understand that. And same, in some countries, cash on delivery is still important. But I would say that we have now different players which have emerged into the market, which are investing very heavily in the network capacity to be able to serve the consumers and to be able to serve the consumers in the 6 major countries. That's very important. And I think Fiona mentioned about capacity, singles days, etc. You can see that now those commercial partners are actually able to actually sustain that delivery to shoppers within those days. But it goes through major investment phases. La Poste has one of those companies called Ninja Van, which is probably the biggest one and the largest one in the region. And I can tell you that we go through major investment in order to be able to cover actually the shoppers in the different countries. And that's part of our strategy. Now, the quick question is, when you enter Southeast Asia, is where should I locate my warehouse? And what solution should I actually use to actually better deliver my consumers, depending on the channels which I'm saying. So you have different criteria. Which channel am I selling on? What type of product am I selling? What is the profile of the product which I'm selling? What's the average order value of the product which I'm selling? And what are the transit times? You know, these are the criteria which you need to consider when you actually want to choose the best delivery solutions within the region. I will just be focusing on 2, just for, you know, keep it short as well. And then of course we can go into more details in the different workshops. Firstly, actually postal solutions. Those postal solutions will come with positives and negatives, of course. The positives will be the price point. Especially if you actually have lightweight, small product. So I'm thinking about, you know, people which might be shipping like beauty products, typically below 200 grams. They will be the perfect fit for this kind of solution. That's one part. The second part, which is quite interesting, which was not existing before, is that the postal operators within the region have just launched a new tracked solution as well in 2022. So that means you can use the postal and you can have a tracked solution in the region as well. So competitive price as such. But I would say transit times would be longer. It will be a DDU only. So that means it's good if you actually sell low value items, low value stuff. And the tracking will be maybe not to the standards of what you have for you know, a commercial solution. Now let me focus on the commercial solution. Here, you will be using operators which have trust and bring trust for the shoppers, because you still have this mindset in the region, you know, to say, okay, well, if my items are actually being delivered maybe by the Thai Post or Phil Post or Vietnam Post, that the service will not be that good. And that's what the shoppers will also think. So that's something you need to have in mind. So commercial solutions, you know, with company like Ninja Van or GNT, etc., they will be good if you want to have reassurance and bring reassurance to the shopper. Topic number 1. Topic number 2 is that DDP. So DDP is important in terms of the customer experience. It means that you will be paying the duties and taxes on the behalf of the shopper itself. So it's actually better for the whole experience and the whole journey for the shopper. And then COD, cash on delivery. I mean, we didn't touch on that, but still it can be important in the region. And that's something that operators and commercial operators can actually offer. So that means seamless journey, better customer experience for the shoppers in the region. Negatives, of course, might be the price point. But again, it all depends on what type of product you are selling in the regions. Because if you actually send products which are above 500 grams, these solutions are actually good as well. One question on returns, because if some of you are actually selling products, especially in the fashion, you can have in mind that consumers in the region have lower expectation in terms of returns compared with Europe as such. So you have lower actually return rates compared to Europe, of course. It's actually growing as the shoppers are actually maturing in their customers' experience, but still not a key topic, I would say, when you enter the region. But if you want to do that, you need to have a return center in the region able to actually consolidate the product for you, and then maybe able to actually reship to the shoppers in the region. So that's number one. I think besides the logistics itself, what's very important, and we had that before, is actually how do I connect, how do I link my marketplace, my sales channel to my logistics and my warehouse? That's actually most important, because we can do the best at the logistics, but if we don't know what product you are selling, which order actually the shoppers have, it's it's useless. So that's why it's very important that when you actually consider the logistics, you also look at all the IT, OMS in the background, so that you can connect your marketplace, your store in the marketplace, or your social commerce, or your brand.com, your platform that you use between, the link between your sales channel and the logistics provider. So that's why this digital ecosystem is very key in terms of the overall solution. I must say that we've been in a step forward instead of Ascendia, because we now have a share to a company called Enchanto, and this company, what they do is actually helping to actually bridge the store to the logistics provider. So then you have a unique contact point. So I would say very important, especially when you invest into this market. Of course, you need to look at the marketing, you need to look at which sales channel you have, but you also need to consider how easy and how quick you can go to the market, especially from a logistics side of view. So that's really the focus I wanted to say today. And also Singapore as a hub, it's very important as well. If you start in the region, you can start from Singapore itself. So that's something, and we'll be happy to discuss that further, to take any questions that you may have for us as Ascendia, or any on the logistics as well.
Olivia, thank you so much. That's a fascinating presentation. I know
Thanks,
Ian has a quick question around this for you. Ian.
Olivia, if you're just starting out to ship and market product into the region, how do you cope with the thought of having to do lots of large integrations and to look at warehousing when in fact your volumes and the efficiencies, economies of scale just aren't there in the early days? Is there a solution for those earlier stage companies?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. So as such, I would say that's probably the best way is actually to start with a centralized DC option for the region. That would be the scenario one, because as such you don't have to multiply your stock in the region. So it will actually help you to save on cost, and also you don't have I would say product which actually can sit there and not being sold. So that's topic number one. So centralized DC. Topic number two, that's where the IT aggregation is very important, because then that will actually help you to actually connect with the different sales platform, with the different marketplaces. And also last point would be, if you have to localize your stock, I must say the easiest way would be also to consider the free trade zone option. Because then if you have a free trade zone option, then you don't actually need to actually pay the duties and taxes for your product. And then you can have your stock within a free trade zone. And then you can actually start, and scale your sales within the region. And then when you actually get to know exactly which product, which countries you can get the traction, then you can actually start to have localized stock in each of the countries. So these, I would say, are the three factors when you actually enter the Southeast Asia market.
Olivia, thank you. That's great. And again, more questions later on the panel. And as we mentioned earlier, there'll be a dedicated workshop for Olivier to be talked to next week. We need to move on a little bit now and talk about actually something equally important, which actually is the compliance angle in all of this. And we're thrilled and delighted to welcome Hugh Darwell from Acclaim. Hugh, tell us more about, from a corporate perspective, as to what companies need to do in APAC.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Well, we've heard already about the marketing and the sales and the logistics. Now we get to the point of actually recording things and paying tax and those sorts of boring but very important subjects. My name's Hugh Darwell. I'm a Regional Business Development Director in Acclaim. And just a bit of background on Acclaim. We're a corporate services provider in Asia and have offices across 11 countries in Asia Pacific. So we cover Australia, Cambodia, China, Hong Kong, India, Indonesia, the Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. And in each of those countries, we have tax and accounting experts to help our clients navigate the corporate compliance obligations that they have. So the main services that we offer are establishment services for companies that want to set up either as a company or a branch or a representative office. We provide taxation services, including monthly tax returns, annual tax returns, and advice on general tax matters. And in particular, I think what's very relevant to the e-commerce sphere is advice on GST and VAT regimes around the region. We also provide accounting services, which range from basic bookkeeping through to monthly and annual accounts preparations, and also helping clients implement accounting systems for their businesses in the region. And another of our services are payroll services, where companies have employees in the region. Each country has different tax and social security obligations, and we manage the payrolls of many of our clients in the countries in which they are. So when you're looking at expanding your business outside of the UK, it's important that you stay smartly compliant with the rules by understanding the local laws in each jurisdiction. And there are many horror stories around of companies that have not complied with the local rules, or they've ignored them, and they've been badly burned in the process. So the initial question to consider when you're looking at expanding into Asia Pacific is whether you need to set up a company in one or more jurisdictions. And of course, the answer is it depends. So there's two main factors that you should really consider in working out whether you should set a company up in the region. The first is, what is your expected volume of sales? So you need to make sure that the costs of setting up and maintaining any companies in any of the countries certainly exceed, do not exceed the sales that your company is making, so that you can turn a profit. So obviously it needs to be analysed on a country by country basis. And although there are various trade and economic partnerships providing for reduced tariffs around the region, like the ASEAN group of nations, the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, that is a trade agreement amongst the ASEAN countries, and also China, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. Despite that, each country maintains their own tax laws and their own corporate laws. And so you need to make sure that you understand those in going into any of these countries. So once you've set up in a country, you then have compliance costs like monthly tax returns, VAT returns, those sorts of things. So they need to be factored into the thinking. So it comes down to a question of, can your sales support the costs of setting up an entity? Secondly, in looking at whether you should be setting up an entity is, do you need employees on the ground to capitalize on opportunities in APAC, or can you do most of your business from your home base in the UK? And if you come to the conclusion that you need to have employees in the region for your sales and marketing purposes, then the question is, well, do you actually need a company in the region yourself, or can you use what's known as a employer of record, where companies in the region, and Acclaim is one of those ones that offers this service, we can employ people on your behalf. So an employee is employed in Acclaim in a particular country, and then we subcontract that employee out exclusively to your company to do the sales and marketing. And that can often be a more efficient way of putting employees in the region without going to the expense of setting up a new company to do so. So if you decide not to set up an entity, that's not the end of the story. because depending on how you sell your products into the market, you might have an obligation to register in a particular country for GST or VAT purposes. Most countries, and a number of these countries have introduced laws recently, they have e-commerce laws, which are designed to bring within the VAT net all transactions where non-resident companies sell goods and services to consumers and businesses in their particular country. The rules differ from country to country. Some require registration with absolutely no sales threshold. Vietnam's an example of that. Some have a registrations threshold of around the $50,000, $100,000 mark. Countries like Malaysia are an example of that. And others have no registration requirement at all. And the Philippines is one of those countries. So in the sale of, where you have sale of physical goods, the collection point for VAT is fairly straightforward because that can be collected when the goods are collected from the importer. But then you've got sales that are delivered online, like video games, online media, and those types of services where the collection of VAT is far more complicated. But the rules in each country provide that the provider of those services have an obligation to report their sales in each country. So this is where an analysis of your particular circumstances by a professional firm that's familiar in the country in which you're operating is necessary in planning your foray into the Asia Pacific markets. As some of the early speakers have mentioned, you can use, and many of you will use, an online marketplace like Amazon to assist you in selling your products. And in some jurisdictions, the VAT obligation is passed on to the marketplace operator, but in other jurisdictions, it's not. And again, it's very important to know on a jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis what the rules are and what your obligations are to register. Another sort of a soft factor, I suppose, in working out your sales plan into the region is looking at the currency in which your sales are made. For each country in Asia, there's a different currency, and most consumers prefer to pay in their own local currency. So it's an important factor to build your product offering. One of the things that you should look at is that there are many online foreign exchange providers who are specifically set up to provide services to companies like exporters like yourself and e-commerce providers. And we would recommend that you develop a working relationship with one of those as part of your planning of the expansion of your business. So in conclusion, each country in the region has different rules, and it's important that you're aware of these rules and comply with them. And this is where professional firms like Acclaim can assist you to remain smartly compliant. So thank you for your attention.
Hugh, thank you so much. I'm conscious of time at the moment, so I'm going to save any questions for the panel. And also, as we say, we have a workshop next week, but really interesting and really fundamental stuff for any company looking to expand and land in the region. Thank you so much, Hugh. And now our last presenter, but by no means least, and we have a saying in GTM, which is never leave home without talking to an international trade advisor. And there aren't many better trade advisors than the one we have on the call now, and that's Estelle Dingley. Estelle, can you talk a little bit about the match funding that the DIT can provide and support as well?
Thank you, Mark. So yes, everything that we've heard this morning is going to be costing money, and we currently run the Internationalisation Fund, which is a match fund. So providing that you are eligible and that you are, there is still money in the pot where you are located, you can access the fund to, for example, pay some of those legal advice you're going to need around registration or compliance, or it may be that you need to go and visit the market in person when restrictions are completely lifted. You might also want to do some translation of your website or localization, or your product needs translated. So there's a lot available, and this is matched funding. So for each pound, we will match £1 up to £18,000 project. So at the end of your project, you could be claiming back £9,000. And if you need more information, just get in touch directly and I'll be able to just talk you through how to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Estelle. That's very succinct, but a very powerful piece of support that UK companies can use in these challenging times. Talking about UK companies, we're thrilled to have on the call a UK company who's expanding and landing in Southeast Asia and doing very well. And I'd like to introduce that company to you now, and that's Massimos Store and James Story-Pugh. James, tell us a little bit about Massimos Store and what you're doing in APAC.
Yeah, morning all. We founded a business in the UK 4 years ago, focused around the CBD and health and wellness space, created a marketplace in the UK, and then really saw Asia as the kind of next step in terms of the expansion strategy. So kind of working closely with an ecosystem of kind of key partners here in the UK, we built up a retail presence across Hong Kong. We have 5 retail stores now for the key malls in Hong Kong. We have our own omni-channel e-com operations in Hong Kong. We also sell on a multi-brand store on Tmall and JD cross-border from Hong Kong into China. And we felt, you know, there was a lot of conversation around China two or three, you know, about 4 or 5 years ago. It faded down a bit, and then it's kind of picked up again. And we really feel that in comparison to the challenges we've faced selling into Europe post Brexit, that Asia offered a fantastic opportunity to kind of expand our global reach. You know, we now work with 45 brands, helping them on a dropship model from the UK into Hong Kong. So we managed to put together a structure where brands dropship to Heathrow, and then we do in inverted commas final mile Heathrow to the consumers in Hong Kong, and then Hong Kong into China, and it's worked out fantastically well. So look, I think in terms of this conversation, that the requirements and desire to go to Asia doesn't have to be kind of high kind of capex or opex in that respect. There are ways to kind of dip your toe in the water and begin to understand what potential demand there could be for your products through fairly simple solutions. So, you know, from our perspective, you know, it took a bit of time to kind of build out the infrastructure, but the bigger picture is it's a fantastic opportunity. They're amazing markets, and it's definitely worth looking at as part of a wider international strategy.
James, thanks a lot. Question to you. What were the biggest challenges you faced when you've been doing all this expansion work? And what questions would you like to ask some of the panel, given the shoes you fill at the moment?
It's a good question, Mark. Brought out. Two key challenges we faced was finding the right resources here in the UK to talk to about looking at exporting into that region. Luckily, on the call today, we have a number of those high quality resources here. Secondly, was also finding the right resources in situ to support understanding that actually developing and building to that region is fairly challenging to undertake from a UK perspective only. So finding the right partner in region to support that is absolutely critical. Otherwise, you're going to come into a lot of kind of very quickly come unstuck as part of that process. So they're the two biggest challenges which we were able to resolve. Luckily, I think in terms of kind of questions to the panel is just really understanding, you know, what you're looking to achieve by exporting into Asia and understand how that fits into kind of wider global strategy for the business. I think it's also important to understand, you know, what steps you're taking, what your timelines are, and who you're looking to work with. Absolutely critical.
Thanks very much, James. Can I bring Sarah in at this point from GS1? And Sarah, obviously, this links back into the whole sort of support levels that both GS1 and DIT can bring. Have you got some key questions you want to pose to the panelists, or just provide a little bit more insight about what GS1 could do in support?
I think the big question that we found, and we touched on a little bit about the personalisation, we make the mistake, or historically made the mistake, of seeing Europe as a mass. I think it's really important. What's the best way for new businesses to understand the social context when it comes to selling for the different areas within the region? My quote of the day is, realistically, social is the internet for some of these countries. And I think we always are in danger of seeing the world through a very UK lens, where we've got very distinct channels. So top tips for how you understand and build that trust so you feel authentic for the end customer, I think.
Thank you, Sarah.
Just a small question to drop in there with like 3 minutes to go.
One of the key things here is, I mean, it's both a region pivoted out of Singapore, but there's a lot of localization. And I'd like to ask each of the panelists and presenters to kind of explain a little bit about juxtaposition between Singapore being a central hub and the regionalism of Thailand or Philippines, and how that all links in what you do. Maybe we can start with Fiona on that.
So I think when we look at the entire Southeast Asia region, there are different channels in each market that really work, right? So just looking at social commerce, I remember 5 years ago, when social commerce just started, meaning that we sold on social channels, it was actually a beauty brand that we were working with that started in Thailand online. So it wasn't Facebook, wasn't Instagram, it was just live. And I think what you have to consider as a business is really that every country's target audience, your shoppers, they shop on different channels, and localization of the product is also very important, because you can't just list your items, your product descriptions in English on a Thai marketplace or an Indonesian marketplace and expect people to understand it, right? So there's a lot of that localization and translation that goes in. And then translation, we all know, is a big headache, right? Because I was talking to one of the translation agencies, and they were telling me that they had to redo everything for a client because the client had no idea that his shop sign or something on the e-commerce store said that he was selling petrol when he wasn't. He was actually selling like food or something. So yeah, there's sort of nuances that you really have to get right. Otherwise you just become a little bit of a joke there, right? So that's what we've seen, when brands they start from Singapore, and Singapore's super easy, right? Everyone's English, everything's English, it's very easy. But when you go to Malaysia, you go to Thailand, you go to Philippines, you have Tagalog, you have Bahasa Indonesia, Bahasa Melayu, and these are all different things that you have to consider, and the way that they shop. Some of them, they like live streaming, some they like to go on marketplaces because there is gamification. People play games on the marketplaces now and like browse through new products. So you have to be where your consumer is at, and I think that's the real challenge when you look across Southeast Asia, right? Trying to identify where your shoppers would be. Yeah.
Thanks, Fiona. Ian's got a question for you now, and to CK.
And this is inspired with John's question from earlier on, and that is to try and understand if there is a generalization possible. John asked, what sort of percentage growth do companies normally see when expanding into the region? And his second question, I think this is great actually, what sort of prices are customers willing to pay for product? So we can set that in the context of what we would be doing in the UK and the price points there, and how sensitive it is, and how you address any issues around that. So that's really for CK and Fiona, I suspect.
CK, do you want to chip in there?
So yeah, I can add some light to it, where in terms of expansion and probably from a social commerce perspective, we really see that social commerce is great from attracting new customers, right? It's really about leveraging these social channels, which the brands already leverage, but then inviting more customers to chat and using some of those tools that these platforms enable to bring in new customers and then making them loyal customers on these channels. On the price point, maybe I'll defer to Fiona, but just what we have seen is we have seen brands from really small ticket items to selling a single, like we have beauty brands using our platforms and our customers are more than okay to buy like $1,000 bottle of cream, even on a WhatsApp, for example, right? So because there's this trust between the brand and there's a human agent also who can get involved in the selling process, that does alleviate the price point question, as long as the service is good and the experience is good. Of course, the product is a no-brainer. I think high ticket items are also something that can go on these platforms.
Yeah,
Fiona?
and I think that the price point question is very interesting, right? Because, you know, now when we look at the marketplaces in the region, we say that there is a race to the bottom. Everyone is doing discounts, right? 30% off, 50% off, you know, and we're starting to see people becoming immune, right, to this Singles Day, 11/11, 12/12, Black Friday. That now there's one every month, 1/1, 2/2, 3/3. I tune out, you know, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who's tuning out. And what I've heard from brands is that if they don't do a minimum of 50% off on the marketplaces, some of them, they don't get any noticeable sales also, right? But then of course there's also the other side of it where CK just touched on, where people are willing to splurge $1,000 on a cream, you know, a few $100s on a shampoo on the marketplaces, as long as, you know, your brand awareness, it was done well. They connect very well with your brand. They trust that when they place an order with you, the item that comes is genuine, because that's very important, not in the Singapore context, but in the Thai, Vietnamese, Indonesia context, which is why in these countries, cash on delivery is king. So you need to figure out a way to offer cash on delivery as a payment option to these consumers, because they don't trust that mid-transit to me, my Adidas shoes are not going to be swapped out for Adidas or, you know, some other random brand, right? And then they get the counterfeit products in front of them. They want to physically inspect the items and make sure that they are genuine before they hand over the money to the last mile provider. So again, these are things to consider. You know, so when you ask me about price point, it's difficult to answer because there's a variety, you know, there are discounts, marketplaces can be seen as discounting, but at the same time, if you look at the middle class population in these countries, we're really rising up. The average order values for each marketplace seems to be going up. Average items per order, I would say, is pretty stagnant at 2 or 3 items, but because of the convenience and you know, short lead times nowadays, people do tend to buy an item by item, not just whenever they need it, right? Because they know that free delivery and it comes. So there's a lot of change going on. So we really have to delve into your industry specifically and look at that consumer behavior and also the willingness of people to pay for the product. Yeah.
Fiona, that's really interesting. I'd like to bring in, if I can, Olivier here, because obviously this plays into the last mile, the returns piece on a localization basis. Do you want to give us a bit of an insight about how you can support that? You're on mute.
Apologies, I'm just muting myself. Yeah, so that's very important as well. So coming to the question about the average, you know, basket value, I think it's very difficult to answer today, but we have a wide range of product and sellers today ourselves. That's why it's very important to actually have the right partner for the last mile delivery in the different countries. I would say that's key for the success in your expansion to the market. Now, if you think about the market is also being more structured as it is currently, and if you think about commercial carriers like G&T again or Ninja Van, they are carriers which actually are being trusted and are usually carriers which are certified by the marketplaces themselves, which actually bring the value to the consumers in the different countries. So that's topic number 1. Topic number 2, they are also carriers which are able to manage the cash on delivery. So if you think about cash on delivery, as Fiona mentioned, in some markets, it's still a key payment methods for the consumers, especially when you think about cross-border, and they would be able to actually manage that. Then one important point, but it's true for every cross-border expansion. It's about customs clearance. And that's the most important when you expand everywhere. I think you guys in the UK have been experiencing that for the Brexit and Europe. It's no more, you know, I would say it's no more difficult for us, you know, in Southeast Asia. You have to comply with regulation, of course. You have to give the right paperwork as well, but we do the customs clearance in the different country, and we are able to actually do cross-border from Singapore into the different countries. And that's something that, again, we are doing on a day-to-day from our side. So these are, really points which are important. First one is about having a carrier which is trusted, known, well known by the consumers and the shoppers in the different countries. Secondly, is to have a carrier which is able, for example, to actually support the cash on delivery if needed, according to the different methods. And then the last one is about customs clearance, customs declaration, and something that you can do, across the region, so that there is a seamless for you as a seller and for the shopper across the region. So that's the 3 different points which I wanted to point it out.
Olivia, that's great. And I know Sarah will nod a lot when I mention how important data is in all of this. And making sure, as a GS1 member, your barcoding really works to maximize that data flow and all the customs and management thereof. Can I bring in also the team at Acclaim here, because that sinks into not simply moving goods, but getting paid and setting up an operation and de-risking. And again, that local regional play, tell us, Hugh, how that fits into these, what we've just been talking about. You there, Hugh?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. Forgot to unmute myself. Yeah, like in particular, looking, as I mentioned earlier, looking at the payment in the local currency and making sure that you've got a appropriate foreign exchange party to deal with your payments and to deal with it efficiently, because if you're going to go through banks, you tend to lose quite a bit on the exchange rate, whereas some of these new providers are very, very sharp in terms of their pricing, etc. In terms of bringing stuff into the countries, as Olivier mentioned, the customs clearance process is a very very important one, and that's something that the local logistics experts can help with. And before you do that, if you're bringing it in yourself, some companies need to be registered in countries for customs and excise purposes. So we can help companies with that as well.
Hugh, thank you so much. One of the things that's really coming through in this panel event is, and we always say this at GTM, that international expansion isn't a destination, it's a journey. There are a series of inflection points as you grow, as you change, depending on the country you go in, the product, the services, and everything else. And I just want to bring this back to Sarah to see, maybe Sarah, if you can pull some of these threads together before we conclude, about how important all these different elements are in building a story and understanding how your brand can expand, and communicating that hopefully to some of the experts we've got on this call.
Wow. I've been really inspired by the conversation this morning. We know when we've talked to our members that through 87% of them are joining to trade direct to consumer, and at least as many have social on their sales channels route. So typically everybody imagines GS1 and the barcodes to be bricks and mortar, and the beep at the till in Sainsbury's or Tesco's. Instagram and Facebook are way in advance, along with the marketplaces, are way in advance of people's reasons to join GS1, and they've bumped the classic retailers off our top 10 reasons. So it's really important, because we know our members are finding their customers, that this sort of inspiration about the how to get the products there and making it easy, so it's as flexible for them to sell to Singapore as it is for them to sell to Salford, is really where we see the growth coming. And I think we've touched on this today, and I'm really looking forward to the workshops and allowing people to get under the skin. All too often these Zoom calls are just at a top level, and I think we leave the audience waiting. I think doing it in a 2-stage approach, so today about the top tips, and then next week about getting into the detail, real practical use cases for individuals to genuinely help. And we're on a mission to find free support for as many of our SME members as possible. So thank you, Estelle from the DIT. Thank you everybody for giving of your time this morning. But you know, realistically, we want to find those opportunities so that the investment that people are putting into making their brands and their businesses come alive can be realized in Asia.
Sarah, thank you so much. I think that's a great wrap. Can I thank everyone for participating? Thank you to Fiona from TMX, CK, particularly because you weren't feeling so well. Thank you for coming on despite all of that. Olivier and Hugh, and of course, always Estelle. Fantastic to have your support, and great to hear from the team at Mello and to understand what they're doing already in APAC. So I'm going to sign off and say we have a one-to-one event next week. For anyone who's interested, please do see if you can log in and participate. And finally, our thanks to GS1 and Sarah and the team for facilitating and supporting this event. Thank you all. Good morning or good night, depending where you are in the world.
Have a great Wednesday, everybody. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.